Thank you very much for joining us today. We are very happy to have you in this live webinar with Andrew and Charlotte today. My name is Courtney. I'm from PropAcademy, and I'm the National Business Development Manager. Today, we are going to have Andrew answer some questions of ours, and we just want to thank you for sending questions through to us, as well as the request of webinars that you like. This webinar request came from your demand, so please, at the end of the webinar, if you think we could hit a different topic, whatever is interesting to you guys, then we will work on it, get a facilitator in to answer your questions. These are free webinars and they're here to uplift the industry. So PropAcademy is very pro uplifting the industry, be it with free education or studying through qualifications. We are here for you. So I'm going to now get started with the meeting. I'm going to hand over to Charlotte Nathanson. If you could just introduce yourself to us and then hand over to Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you guys so much for being here today. As Courtney mentioned, I am Charlotte Nathanson. I am a sales representative for PropAcademy, and I've been with PropAcademy since 2023, absolutely loving my journey. I'm very excited to have you guys here today. And yeah, we're excited to see what input we can get from Andrew regarding commercial property. So Andrew, thank you so much.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, ladies. My background, I've been in the commercial industrial property game for over 30 years now, predominantly as a broker and as a principal. I have had some dabblings in the management side of commercial and industrial property. And I look forward to answering your questions today and giving everyone a basic overview of some of the skills and techniques that are required in filling vacant space in a property that you may be managing, and a little bit of client vetting, some ideas about client vetting. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. So how it's going to work is our audience have their cameras and mics turned off, and that's on purpose to make sure that this is a high quality question and answer session. However, we always want your input. So if you were to click on the chat button, you can post a question that you may have. Obviously, see if Andrew's going to answer it. If not, please post your question up. Right at the end, we will read questions to Andrew. So yeah, we're going to respect each other's time and finish when we need to finish. We will not keep you here forever. Any questions that have gone unanswered, we will respond to you with the replies. So now I think we can get started. Charlotte, if you can go ahead.
Amazing. Thank you, Courtney. So Andrew, if we are going to look at the marketing a vacant space section for now, if we start at the very beginning, say you've got a vacant space on your hands. Step one, how do we go about identifying the exact space available?
Thanks for the question. This might actually sound silly, but the reality is you might be managing quite a large portfolio and a unit comes available. Either the landlord tells you, or obviously you're dealing with the vacating tenant, or there's a situation you now have a unit that's becoming available. Now, if you've been working with a portfolio for a long time, you'll probably have most of this information already, but specifically a new portfolio, it sounds silly to say that you need to identify the space that's available. And the reason I say that is it has happened to many people in this industry where they actually identify the wrong space. And the analogy I like to use is if you had to give the address of the unit that's available to let to a third party or someone who's not in the property game, they would be able to walk up to the front door and knock on it. And the reason I say this is important is because as buildings and time passes, space changes in the sense that some units get made bigger, some get made smaller, some are added on. And it needs to be critically clear to yourself and to anyone you're going to market the space out to which unit is available. And it sounds almost silly, but these mistakes happen. People try to rent out the wrong space. We've literally just had an incident recently where we had someone try to report us for advertising the wrong unit, and they were actually wrong. They thought they misidentified the unit that they were trying to rent. It was competition of ours, and they complained to the landlord only to be put in their place. So it sounds very silly and very simple, but you need to be very clear of what unit you are letting.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm glad that you managed to get that all sorted. So I guess the next big step is how do we confirm the letting details so that we're not working off of guesswork?
Yeah, this also comes down to relationships with your landlord, and again, how well you know your portfolio. If you are effective, you know the portfolio like the back of your hand, and you'll have files from previous deals and transactions you've done on a unit that's available to let. Or if it's a new unit or a new portfolio that you're looking after, it comes down to having a very, very deep conversation with the landlord to identify exactly the details. So we are dealing predominantly with commercial property. And remember, commercial is a sort of a general name for commercial being offices, retail being shops, and industrial properties. And even under there's subsectors. Retail could be a strip mall, it could be a major regional shopping center, it could just be a shop on a high street. Industrial could be warehousing, manufacturing. Again, there's lots of different types of properties and subsectors. So when you're confirming the details, you need to have that very, very strong conversation with the landlord, and then go even further. And for example, where I say go even further, is have on record, for example, if it's a sectional title building, have the sectional title plans that, again, identify exactly which unit you're talking about, and then also gives you exactly what square meterage you're working with. The onus is on you as a potential person trying to rent out the space, that you've got all the information right. So it's questions, and I'm mixing up commercial, offices, retail, and industrial, is knowing exactly what the square meterage is that is available. What part of that square meterage is common area that sits outside of the unit but is part of the rent. The height of the building, if it's an industrial, what sort of access to the building for any of the three. Is it stairs? Is it a lift? Will an interlink be able to drive into a warehouse? Industrial questions like what sort of power? Again, there's lots of questions. And as an effective property manager, you will have answers to all these questions. So again, it goes right back to your CRM, where you have a very strong relationship with your landlord, and you build up a database of all the units that are on your portfolio, so that anytime any specific unit comes available, you have all the answers. Because guaranteed, the minute you put it out there to the market, you're going to get asked a question, and the worst thing is to say you don't know the answer to something, and you need to come back to them. To be efficient, you want to have all the answers, so you need to ask all the questions. Just coming back to that, it also means that's where you need to have a good understanding of property and have an awareness of property to ask all the right questions. You need to know, I'm dealing with industrial property. I need to know what the power is. Is it single or three-phase? If it's three-phase, how many amps? Again, this is technical terms for people who don't deal with that sort of thing. But if you are going to deal with that sort of space, you need to educate yourself to understand what is all the detail that you need to know for the units that you're going to be working with.
And I think that's quite key, because it's one thing, how do I confirm letting details? But I don't think, like, the seriousness around it, the heaviness around it, it's not just something we can do with guesswork. So educating yourself on how to find this information correctly. And then obviously, like Andrew said, keeping it in a portfolio. I mean, these are things so that when your client calls you back, you know exactly, probably more than he knows about his property. And I think it's important. It can get you in a lot of trouble if you mislead people.
Charlotte, I'll just touch on something there. You're quite right. Sometimes if you're an effective broker or property manager, you actually will end up in a scenario where there are going to be properties that you actually know better than the owner of the property. Remember, the owner's bought an investment. He's worried about the cash flow. Some don't even care about the property. They just want to see their money coming in. And that's your job, to know his property and to come back to him and tell him this needs to be done, that needs to be done. Bear in mind also the situation, and we are talking commercial and industrial property here, and it is different to residential, is because of the nature of commercial industrial property, which is predominantly letting and not sales, predominantly letting, and because of the relationship, you're dealing with one landlord for many, many, many years. Occasionally, the building might be sold, you have a new landlord you're dealing with on a sectional title unit in a complex you might be managing. But ultimately, because of the nature of the leases, which are generally short in the sense that it could be 1, 3, 5 years and occasionally longer, at the end of that period, the unit comes available again. Now, unless there's been a radical refurb to the building, a 250 square meter mini factory unit will still be a 250 square meter mini factory unit in 3 years' time when the unit changes. So again, if you build up your database up front and you have a good relationship with your landlord, and you have the information and you've got a file, when you open it, essentially, other than a cursory site inspection, the only thing that's going to change is the rental that's being asked because of the passage of time. So critical to do your homework, ask the questions, know what to ask, and then build up that database of information.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrew. Now, I think it's very clear to everyone that those details need to be in place in order to get the correct information across. So that's very helpful. Thank you. Once you've now got all the details in place, before you can even think about advertising or showing off the property that you have, what kind of mandate should I be using for this?
So mandates are the crux to our industry. Without a mandate, we don't get paid. Without a mandate, there could be challenges to the fees we charge for the work we do if we rent out a unit. Again, there's a lot of gray in this industry. There's not a lot of black and white. So as a managing company, you might wear two hats and have a different division that does broking, or maybe within your own management, you guys do the letting. But ultimately, you need to have some form of a mandate with the owner or the person responsible for the property. So essentially, there's three types of mandates. There's a sole mandate, there's a sole and exclusive mandate, and there's an open mandate. That's the absolute basics. Again, you'll have this in place if you've been managing a portfolio for a long time. You'll know what sort of relationship you have with the landlord, and obviously the mandate covers the information of the unit you're going to let and obviously how you're going to get paid. And that's why we're here, all to make some money. Generally speaking, in the commercial and industrial game, a landlord will go for an open mandate. He'll want the property to go out to all the agents and to all the brokers in the area, but may expect you to coordinate that as a managing agent. But certainly there's no reason why you can't try to do the lease in-house, make a bit of money for the company, and try exclude the other agents by doing that work. But the industry standard is an open mandate. If you are looking at sole mandates, I'm going to make a differentiation because a lot of people surprisingly don't know the difference between a sole mandate and a sole and exclusive mandate. If you have a sole mandate with a landlord, it doesn't preclude him from letting the unit out himself and not paying you. Assuming that he deals with someone that you don't know about. Someone approaches him directly, he does the lease himself, you don't have a right to go and ask him for commission. If you feel you want to manage the entire operation and you don't want to have any situations where the landlord enters into a lease agreement, then hands you a very tatty lease, which you as the manager now have to handle, a lease that doesn't tie in with your standard lease agreements and it creates a bit of conflict amongst the tenants, you may want to enter into a sole and exclusive mandate, which means regardless of whether you do the lease or the landlord does the lease agreement, you're still going to be paid and you're still part of putting that whole deal together. And it's important to have that conversation with the landlord. Again, a lot of these conversations solve a lot of problems later if they're all had early. Have those difficult conversations early. How to set up the mandate, what sort of mandate, and what are the scenarios down the road if there's any situation.
I'm going to chip in there because the mandate's so important. I mean, I focus mainly on the residential side of things, but just I've noticed with agents as well, asking for that sole mandate, it takes a lot of guts and you have to be totally confident in what you're doing. And I find once you've learned the ropes and you've built up your own confidence, asking for that sole mandate in the beginning, it does pay off. I know that it's majority open mandates in commercial, and I get that. But also what Andrew has mentioned, like going through that mandate, it's about transparency. So you and the landlord are totally transparent as to what could happen, and if it does happen, what would the outcome be? And I think that is incredibly important, not only a legal requirement, but extremely important for everyone to be open right from the beginning.
Thanks, Charlotte. And if I can add to that, just some people might want to understand, people who've been in the residential game and are considering transitioning through to the commercial game. Why is the sole mandate more of a common factor in commercial and industrial? And it goes back to the situation where you are forming a relationship with a landlord, and that relationship is going to be open over many, many years and many, many turnovers of that unit and various tenants. And because of that, that landlord also has relationships with lots of other agents. He knows them all. They know each other personally. I still deal with agents that I met, landlords I met 31 years ago. So to try and enforce a sole mandate on a landlord, you're putting yourself under a lot of pressure. He just wants a deal done, whether he likes you or not. It's at the end of the day, it's business, and he wants a deal done. So he's going to have an open mandate with all the brokers, and the person who brings in the first deal, he's going to sign it. If you try to lock him down into a sole mandate, you're now almost excluding your other clients, you're excluding your other landlords. Remember, your landlord is your client because they're the ones who pay you. You're excluding all of them to put all your focus on one property to ensure that you get that deal done. And in the meantime, other agents will be phoning the landlord, say, we got clients, but we're not going to show the property until such time as that sole mandate expires, because why do we need to share money with anyone else? So for that specific reason, it's quite rare to have anything near a sole mandate in the commercial and industrial game.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've now touched on the brokers and agents side. So I am just going to miss my next question that I had lined up. And I'm just going to jump straight into who exactly are you marketing to in this field? Like, who would you say is your dream tenant?
Someone who pays. So the dream tenant, again, that's a very broad question, and the reason I say that is that you need to assess the space that's available and who will fit the property correctly. You might think of an industrial and you think industrial, anyone can go into an industrial unit, but no, they can't. You need to understand, is the tenant going to be for the better of the complex or the unit or the shopping center or things like that? They need to be complementary. And it's very easy to just go for the first deal that comes across the table. And you're going to get thrown everything, especially if you're working with an open mandate. You're going to get brokers who just want to get a deal done, and they're going to be able to just send you every single person who says, I like it, I want it. You as the property manager need to consider quite seriously how that person is going to play with their neighbors. You don't want a situation where you've got a small mini factory complex and someone moves in and they're going to be a panel beater. Panel beaters are not the favorite because A, they're noisy, B, they're messy, and they have lots and lots of broken cars, which they generally end up parking in everyone else's driveways and entrances and parking bays. So you're looking for the ideal tenant, and who you're marketing to. You need to consider the building. You've got to consider the other tenants and how they're going to all mix together.
That's amazing. No, that definitely makes sense. You don't want someone moving into your office space that's got a completely different career or different side to what you do currently.
And then in that, you also don't want people doing the same thing, right?
100%.
Well, you'd be surprised. So just a little bit of an anecdote. You'll be surprised in the commercial and industrial game, you're dealing with businessmen. And very briefly, I'll tell you that you get some businesses that are in competition with each other where they want to be nowhere near each other. They want to create their own identity and have their clients come to them. You also get some who literally want to be next door to their competition because they feel they're stronger, they're more aggressive, and they'll pull those clients away. So again, you need to know, as a property manager, you want two strong tenants, but you also got to consider, is this little war of business going to have any impact on the other neighbors in the units that you're renting out? So it's actually, you got to understand your tenant that's coming in.
Amazing. I actually did never think about it like that. So thank you so much. So now that we've spoken about the who, now I just want to talk a little bit about the how and kind of what platforms are the best for putting the property that we have into the spotlight.
So I think platforms, I'm going to digress from platforms. There's the usuals, the usual suspects, and you got your Property 24 and you've got your private property. You certainly can use your own website. What some companies do, they even form a website for the unit or for the complex that they are renting out. For example, a shopping center, I'm just going to use, any shopping center really, they can have their own website. And then obviously you can tap into that website and have a vacancy page where you can then advertise advertise the units that are available. So there's a lot of social media, there's a lot of internet interaction. You can go for paid ads, Google ads to draw attention to a unit that you're renting out. Certainly, more progressive brokers are using social media in the sense of TikTok, Instagram, Facebook to market properties. So there's a wide spectrum of internet that is available to brokers to market property. And again, the excuse me, the content that's being produced with the help of AI and also working with creatives is incredible. There's some amazing content that's coming out that really sells the place and makes it look good. I'm going to digress slightly and then just say again, for people who may be entering into the commercial space coming from a residential, going back to what I said earlier on, you're dealing with a situation where you may sell the same unit again and again and again, and you're going to work with the same complex for decades, maybe even the same owner for many, many decades. A very soft skill for marketing a unit in a commercial scenario, be it a shopping center, an office building, or an industrial building, is you need to offer it to the neighbor. Now, it sounds very weird, but this is the ABC of being a commercial broker, is, or someone trying to rent out commercial property. The very first exercise you do the moment you get an instruction to rent out space is go physically to the space and knock on every single door around it. Again, regardless of whether it's commercial, retail, industrial, or offices. And you'll be surprised by the strike rate that you'll find that the neighbor wants to move into the unit next door. So again, comparing with residential and not knocking residential, but generally when someone sells a house, they're moving out of the area. And the people next door to the house that's being sold, they've got their house. They don't need a second house. Whereas, I'll give you an example, an industrial operation, a small warehousing operation, they might have signed on new contracts. They've got two choices. They can either relocate to a bigger warehouse, but that means relocating the whole business, whole lot of new stationery for a new address. There's a lot involved in just moving. It's not just a case of locking one door and opening another. The second option is if the unit next door, whether it's the unit behind, on the left or the right, or across the road comes available, they literally just knock through or they just take over that additional space. Nothing changes. They're still at the same address. They've still got the same phone numbers. They've still got the same place for clients to come visit them, for suppliers to visit them. And it's just a very smooth transition to expand the business. So the soft skill for new brokers or new people letting commercial space, whenever you get the instruction, first thing you do is offer to all the neighbors. If you can't physically go there, you can certainly look up who is the neighbor and you can make a phone call or you can send an email. Once you've done that, then you move on to all your various platforms. And as I said, there's a myriad of social media and internet platforms, which are all very good and offer the good return on investment. And the biggest ones obviously being Property 24 and Private Property.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So I want to move on a little bit to the client vetting side. And I know you mentioned it's very important to know your space, to know who your other tenants are as well. But say you've now got interest in the property that you've got to offer. Before you can pop the champagne or get too excited, how do you know which of your interested tenants is the one to go to?
So this is critical. Client vetting, you can also call it as client qualification. You can save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of problem by doing homework on the potential new tenant up front. The questions that you're going to ask are who, what, where, and those are very simple questions which will answer a lot of questions. You need to ask, are they in business? And that sounds strange, but sometimes you get people who are not in business and they're starting a new business. So really that's a challenge. It's not a case of just opening a business, taking a lease and being successful. And to rent out space to someone who literally is starting a new business can be a problem, can be a major issue. So that's the very first question, is you need to establish if the business that wants to rent the space is actually an existing business. And that's done very simply. You can just ask them straight out, how long have you been in business? Where are you operating from? And, are you a bona fide business? The where question is you can compare. You can do a comparison. So if they're wanting to move into a shopping center, you need to find out where they're operating from currently. And then you can do a basic assessment that why they're moving from there to here. There's got to be a reason why they're changing areas, why they want to be in this building. And also, it can raise red flags if it doesn't make sense why they're moving. For example, a small little industrial operation might want to move into a shopping center. It could make sense. They might want to manufacture and sell from the shopping center. If they're going the other way around, why does a shopping operation want to start operating in an industrial space? Are they going to have lots of shoppers coming into an industrial space? That's not a good mix. So it's basic awareness and asking questions. So the who, you actually want to know who's involved in the business and what they bring to the table. You want to know what their business is, and you want to know if they're actually in existence and are a new business. Anything that doesn't answer those simple 3 questions should raise red flags, and it should put you into action to ask more questions and to get further down. What you don't want to do is start working with a tenant, a potential tenant, do all the work, do the offer to lease, do the lease agreement, and then when it comes to commitments and trying to get FICA documentation and financial commitments, the problems start cropping up. For example, a new business, all of a sudden they still need to register a legal entity. That's going to take time. They still need to be registered for VAT. That's going to take time. They still need to open a bank account. It happens, and ultimately, a new business needs significant amount of cash flow to establish themselves. And again, you need to ask these hard questions up front. Otherwise, you will waste a lot of time and a lot of the landlord's time asking him all the questions about the unit for someone who's actually not serious or not able to deliver.
Okay, definitely. So I think it's very important then just to iron out all those facts in the beginning, just to save yourself time, like you said, the landlord as well. So what paperwork exactly is essential in the beginning when you are looking at potential clients?
So the paperwork at the end of it is quite simply you're guided by FICA, the FIC. If someone is genuine and they now are wanting to commit to entering into a negotiation for a unit, and from your point of view, you've done all the qualifying you need to feel comfortable that this is a genuine operation. You think the business is a good fit for the unit that you want to put them into. At this stage, I trust you've had some conversation with the landlord, so he's aware of what's happening, and he's given you the go-ahead to proceed. Now you start doing paperwork. The simplest thing to start off with is a tenant application. A lot of documentation is available on the internet. Obviously, TPN is a very good supplier of documentation. And the nice thing about TPN, for example, is they are very current with their paperwork. So the very first thing is a tenant application. In their tenant application, they're gonna put into writing all the questions you asked earlier on. So now they're committing their answers to a piece of paper, and again, you will go through it and make sure that their story is tied, that everything is as they say. But together with that application is you're going to now start collecting a significant amount of FICA documentation, FIC documentation for the tenant. We'll come to that shortly. The other thing is you're probably going to want to do a credit check of some form with them, and the landlords will expect you to do that. And it is prudent to do a credit check. And the reason I say that is again, as much as people to your face will say lots of things that sound fantastic, you never know what's hiding in the bushes. And a credit check will answer, or rather, a credit check will either clear the people and say these are good people to move ahead with, or again, it's going to raise a red flag, which you then need to address with them and give the landlords a head up that this is what he's dealing with. Often you do come across credit checks that are not fantastic, but there is a reason behind a report. There can be motivation as to why a report may not look good. And again, you're not making the decision, the landlord's making a decision, and he may still elect to go ahead with the tenant. But you can rest assured that you've done your homework and you've done the assessment. Bear in mind, and this is also very important, when you're doing the credit check, whichever agency you choose to go through with a credit check, you need to have permission from the people you're doing the credit check on, that they wish, or not wish, they are happy for you to do that credit check. It is it is not good practice, and I believe it is illegal, to go do a credit check on individuals and a company without their permission. So you do not want to go ahead with that. You start entering into the POPIA Act. It's good housekeeping. Again, as much as you're doing the tenant application, slipped into that will be a list of all the FICA documentation that will be required, and also a document where they sign off saying that they are happy for you to do the credit check with them. Again, credit check will give a lot of answers to the conversations you've been having, and if these people are being transparent and open with you. I lost my train of thought there. There was something else that you need to do in part of that process. Yeah, the FICA documentation is very detailed. I don't know if you address this in another course, but pretty basically, if you are dealing, I need to just read through here. You generally, most of the cases are going to be dealing with a South African registered company. You will need the documentation. You'll need, as I said, let me just get my notes. You need a SARS clearance certificate. You'll need a registration documentation for VAT. Dealing commercial property, there's very rare going to be a situation where you deal where there's no VAT involved, so you need a registration certificate of VAT. You'll need a bank step letter confirming accounts, company registration details, proof of the company's address, physical address. And then you get into the tricky stuff, which is hard to ask for. And again, it's part of the qualifying. You're going to start asking for bank statements, and some landlords, and it is good practice also to get some financial details, financial management accounts, or even audited results. Again, this is a lot of information that you need to get. It is required under the FIC that we have to collect all this information. It's the law. And again, part of the qualifying, as soon as a tenant starts backpedaling a little, that will raise questions. Not to say the landlord won't want to still proceed with them, but as the broker and as the person involved in putting a deal together, you need to make sure that you have the FIC documentation 100% correct for the FIC. If they do an audit and they pick out that you haven't done that properly, there's a problem, a significant problem. So a lot of paperwork gets brought in at this tenant application stage. And again, another reason you're doing this is it's part of the qualifying. And the big part of the qualifying is the fact that they provide all this information and fill out all this documentation. It qualifies them even further because it shows you there's some genuine intent that they actually want to do a deal. At any one of these stages that I've been mentioning right from the beginning, from the very first time someone gets in contact with you and says, I'm not sure about that, you can stop dealing with them. It's a choice you make. You can stop dealing with them because it's a red flag that you don't want to do all the work and then end up with a situation where it's not a good fit or a bad tenant.
Thank you, Andrew. So that actually covered my next question, which I was just going to kind of touch on if you request their bank statements or your credit checks or anything like that. So thank you so much. And I think we've also discussed a bit on how we find the right tenant for a particular space. So I don't want to dive into that again, but just the last question I do have for you is, now say we've got the property, we've got the dream tenant, we've got the right space. How do we seal this deal? Why do we need an OTP or an OTL to lock it down?
Generally, we're going to be dealing with offers to lease mostly, but we can apply the same thinking to the OTP, offer to purchase. This is the final commitment. It's the final test. There is a certain level of commitment once a person puts pen to OTL, offer to lease. They're now showing a full commitment that they want to enter into formal negotiations. The offer to lease will then have all the heads of agreement. It will cover all the bases of all the questions and all the details that are needed that have to be agreed with the landlord. It's a very powerful negotiating document to get the critical issues sorted out. The identification of the property, the rental that will be paid, the length of the lease or the period of the lease, the escalations that are going to come in, the use of the premises. What is the person going to use the premises for? A lot of this can be sorted out in the offer to lease. The other thing that has to happen, that has to be accompanying with the offer to lease, is a letter of resolution. And again, this is a negotiating document in the sense that the company that is entering into the offer to lease has to get a resolution letter from the directors giving a person permission to continue with negotiations on their behalf. This is a critical document to have. You don't want to be caught in a situation where a lease is signed further down the line and someone says, well, I didn't have the authority to sign that the agreement. And now you're sitting in a bit of a challenging spot. And at the end of the day, between the landlord and the tenant, you are the one who has to sort it out. So together with an offer to lease, again, it's a negotiating document to secure all the terms and conditions and heads of agreement before you proceed to a full lease agreement. You also want to get that letter of resolution, which is another sign of commitment that these people are committed to entering into a binding agreement for a period of time.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I've definitely learned an absolute ton from this session, so thank you. I really appreciate it. I just want to hop over to the chat box and see if there were any questions that came through that we might just want to address now.
We just had the one question, which was, do you assess their finances, request their bank statements, and do they provide them? I think there's just a little bit of clarity on that. If you want to touch on that again for us, please, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading the questions through there. Financials are critical. You know, if the reason I say that is you can have a relatively new company that's never traded, and there's just no financials for it. Whereas if a company's been in existence for some time, it will have financials, and that can tell you the health of the business. And that also goes a long way to helping a landlord make a decision if he wants to have the person coming in as a tenant. Financials will tell a very, very quick story of how solvent the company is, what their credit rating is or credit status is, and if they actually can commit to the rent that you're asking.
Yeah.
Again, it is required. It's part of the FRC documentation, because bear in mind there's a second part of FRC where we as brokers need to know who we're dealing with. So financials are also part of that. You know, we need to know how this business is making money, where the money is coming in, how it's being dealt with. Is it a cash business? Because obviously, if there are flags raised, we are duty bound as organizations to make a report to the FRC if there's anything questionable about the financials. So financials is very much part of vetting and very much part of putting a deal together.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Kelly, for the question. It looks like we just have one more from Jenny, and Jenny asks, as a candidate, how do we get into commercial?
So, sorry, if I can just come back to that. Something that can be discussed with regards to financials. There are some companies that are reluctant to release their financials because they are sensitive. There is sensitive information, and there are ways of dealing with that where they can submit redacted financials. I stand to be corrected. I don't know how that stands with FRC, but they can certainly issue some form of redacted financials where the critical information that is needed for the landlord to make a decision is visible. What some landlords do where people are in that situation, and again, this is just general practice. Again, one of the gray areas in our game, nothing's 100% black and white, is if someone cannot issue the full financials and they issue redacted financials, if there's any reason the landlord may feel a little bit nervous, he may actually ask for a larger deposit to give him more security for a situation where he's not getting a full set of financials. And there are reasons why some companies will not give full financials. Again, with the FRC, and as I said, I stand to be corrected, I'm not sure how they feel about partial financials. But it's just something that it's not the end of the world if you don't get 5 years worth of audited financials, that sort of situation. I see someone did request bank statements. Absolutely, bank statements also tell a whole story. If you see a lot of money coming in and a lot of money coming out or going out of the account and nothing left behind, then you have to ask questions. How are they running their day-to-day costs and managing the expenses? So again, it raises questions that you can have a confidential discussion with people. Obviously, if people are nervous about their financials and things like that, there's no reason why you cannot enter an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement where you're giving them confidence that whatever's dealt with is only seen by your eyes and the landlord's eyes. So that's another way of getting around tenants that are nervous to just disclose the financial strength and the financial position of the company.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. It's so important to go into the financials and to make sure that they are sent. And then I think we go into the warning signs. If documents that you're requesting are not sent, then we used to call them, or we still kind of do, as red flag clients. If there's anything that's rushed, urgent, missing documents, that kind of thing, we notify as red flag. Everybody take one step back, relook at our procedure list, see where we're going wrong, and then take it from there. And I think Andrew touched on that quite nicely. So Andrew, there's a question here with regards to, as a candidate, how do we get into commercial? From my side, I said you need to understand the commercial sector, get the right qualifications, choose the right agency, and build a network. But I think what's important is understanding what you're getting into before you do it. It's not a sales pitch whatsoever, but we have a lot of people come to us and say, we want to go from residential to commercial, or we're dabbling in both because of the business structure. What can we do? And that's why we do offer a wide range from very short courses, 790 expats, all the way up to national qualifications. My point is that you will then start taking these short courses and understanding, because it's quite nice with the videos, you understand, okay, this is what happens with the lease agreement. These are the concerns. Is this something you are now interested in? Did you enjoy today's webinar? Because if you didn't, then commercial's not for you. And then taking the shorter skill enhancing courses to just identify if it will suit you better. And if it does, then building yourself up. With the national qualifications, you need to be in a job already, and that stops a lot of people. But that's why there's the skill enhancing courses, so you can actually study before entering the industry. And I think that's very important because you're making a huge life change. And then Charlotte, if you want to go through Kelly's question there.
Perfect.
Sorry,
we do have another. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Courtney, if I can just add to that,
Yes.
for the question, Jenny's question, as a candidate, how do we get into commercial? Quite correct what you've said, Courtney. There's a lot of courses that will give a lot of education, and education is critical. But the other way to get into commercial is to just do it. You clearly have an interest in property. That's why you're in the property sector and you're working with property. The main thing to understand about commercial is it's a very different way of doing business compared to residential. And I alluded it to right at the beginning is it's all about relationships. And I used this example the other day in another webinar where when you're dealing with residential and approximately, the relationship is 90 days. The average house takes 90 days to sell. Someone will contact an agent. They will enter into a mandate. The property will be marketed. On average, 90 days later, that property is sold. And that person who sold the house generally moves out of the area or moves overseas or moves away. And that is the end of the relationship. Occasionally, someone might sell another house a few years later or buy another house. Whereas in commercial and industrial, if you are a very gregarious person, you love the whole idea of CRM, customer relationship management, and you like the idea of talking to people and building up long-term business connections and networking, this is the game for you, because the better your relationship with your landlords, the better business you're going to have. You're always going to know what's available to rent or sell. You're always going to know what's happening in the area because you're talking to people in the area. And you'll also be talking to people that are looking for space. And it's always this ongoing relationship. So it's a very different game, very exciting game. But the first thing to get into it is some basic education, which PropAcademy does offer, to understand the terminology. Once you understand the terminology, then you need to learn the soft skills, which is all predominantly about CRM.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Andrew.
you.
We have one last question from Kelly, and she says, what are key criteria to cover and consider in the business of managing commercial, retail, or industrial property?
I'd hesitate to say that it's easier than residential. The key criteria is communication. at the end of the day is communication. You need to know your property well, know what your landlord likes or dislikes. He will give you a very, very clear mandate of how to look after his property, how to manage his property. The main thing is you're trying to create a situation where you're managing properties that suit the industry. So again, if it's a shopping center, it needs to look like a shopping center and be attractive for people to want to go there. So you need to manage that. It's part of the managing. It's not just about managing tenants. So it's all about, again, coming back to relationships. I think it's the essence is the same as managing residential property. It's just that the people you're dealing with are business people. I don't want to say that you won't deal with emotional people, but certainly you're dealing with more business-like people, and you're dealing with situations that are business related. You're not going to be dealing with someone who's got a cat and the people next door don't like their cat. What we're looking for here is that the space is functional for the tenant and the tenant pays. And at the end of the day, that is the basics of commercial management.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I don't see any more questions coming through on the chat box, but everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an incredibly informative session. So Andrew, we appreciate you and your time so very much. Please, everyone, if you've got any further questions or you have any ideas for upcoming webinars, please pop them in the chat now just so that we can take notes. And yeah, you are welcome to reach out to us as well if you've got any questions. There will be a recording of this session as well, but it'll be live on our podcast page on our website, maybe in about a week or 2 weeks, but then we'll send it out on a mailer as well. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and an awesome week ahead.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. It's been fabulous to see familiar faces and also to maintain the audience. Please let us know what else you would like to discuss. And thank you, Andrew, for going through everything so patiently and thoroughly with us. It was great to have you here.
And any further questions they can send through and we can address them at a later date.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.